Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the fifth audio cast in the series, The Q News Patriot. I'm the Q News Patriot, SG Anon. I come to you tonight with some very exciting news, some information that is very reassuring, some information that I think will help answer a lot of questions and will make some puzzle pieces make a lot more sense. We're going to talk a little bit about military strategy. Just as a disclaimer, I am no personal expert in military strategy. That being said, those who have followed the Q movement, a lot of the truthers in the truth community, they have a general idea of what military strategy is. Those that have sources that are connected to either actual operations or areas that border actual operations. Military strategy is very important. Military strategy is very important to understand. It's very important to break down and analyze. It is worth giving some thought to. It's worth taking, getting a little bit of food and some water or coffee or hot cocoa and sitting down and really crunching it, not from an emotional standpoint or an indignant standpoint or a wrathful standpoint, but just from a neutral standpoint. The best decisions operationally and the only decisions that are typically contenders for operational application are those that are made in a place of calm determination. One would call it fierce determination, fierce dedication to the execution and success of the mission and the plan. The Q operation is a military operation. It is a military operation in a physical sense. It is a military operation in an intelligence sense. It is a military operation in a communications dissemination sense. This is no small movement that you are a part of. If you have come new to the Q movement in the last 60 to 90 days, welcome aboard. Many of us have been here for a good little while, but you're going to learn very quickly some wonderful truth, and I think a lot of understanding is going to flow to you. And tonight we're going to talk a little bit about that understanding. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get to it. All right. Agenda 2020. Let's talk about it. Agenda 2020, Agenda 21, Agenda 2030. All offshoots of the same plan, slight variation in all of them, but the general core structure is the same. The plan to depopulate the world. William Henry Gates, you'll know him as Bill Gates, the CEO of Microsoft, is on a TED Talk, which you can find on YouTube of all places, and it is still there as of yesterday, where he openly presents a plan to depopulate the world 10 to 15% using what he calls effective campaigns of forced vaccination, reproductive management, and food production. The elite have had their sights set on a depopulation agenda for this particular rock that we all call home for quite a long time. The elite are megalomaniacs. Remember that when you find yourself filled with rage discussing these people, you have to remember that, first off, you lose your power when you're filled with rage, because your true peaceful decision-making power, that power that comes out, the power to effect massive change in your world and in this world, it's squelched when we're filled with rage, and it's for people that are certifiably insane. Your rage is wasted. Your rage is a point of indignation coming from a place of understanding that these psychopaths will never know. They will never know the type of emotional sensitivity or um, presence of mind necessary to feel compassion. They don't do that. They kill kids. So, so coming back, the the megalomaniacs, the nut jobs, have been on this war path for a good long while. The coronavirus was selected as the quote unquote fake virus of choice to inaugurate the campaign of forced vaccination in 1956. The vaccine agenda has been a reality at the Rockefeller Institute, at least over, or the Rockefeller Foundation, at least over the last 60 years, since 1962, when a significant portion of R&D began going into reproductive control via vaccination. This agenda has been a long time in culmination. Remember, though, that these elite live hundreds of years. Um, their physiology is otherwise unaffected by the poisons that they pump into the rest of the world. They create insulated pockets of existence for themselves. Many of those pockets for existence are located underground, and they're completely away from the what used to be the strontium chemtrails and various other things in our food and water and medicines and air and etc. that were poisoning us. They have been very diligent about insulating themselves so that they could carry out this agenda. So this agenda, it's been a very long time coming. The Q movement was really polarized after the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, who was essentially the first attempt at a Donald Trump presidency to spearhead a movement with the military and the Patriots, who at that time were still in government, to basically take the country back. John F. Kennedy signed an executive order which got him killed, 11-11-0. And it directed the Treasury to form a commission to return the United States currency, the dollar, to a precious metal backed base. And at the time, it was actually going to be silver because so much of the world's gold was still unaccounted for and missing. That executive order got President Kennedy killed. President Kennedy's assassination was spearheaded by Allen Dulles, chief of the CIA at that time, and at the time sitting Senator George H.W. Bush, who is the son of a dedicated Nazi banker in the United States. The Q movement was very polarized after Kennedy's assassination. There are those within the truther community who openly proclaimed that President Kennedy was mortally wounded and injured that day, but did not, in fact, pass away that day. I cannot verify that that is true, but I can also not verify that that is false. With so much of what we know to be a psyop in our history, and literally everything that we've learned about our country that has any importance being almost a flagrant lie, with the one exception of oral tradition, which has always guided us from even days past, it is extremely possible that those individuals are correct. What becomes of that is anybody's speculation. The Q movement is a group of generals deep within the United States military and the United States military intelligence arm. That arm has a former name called the Defense Intelligence Agency, or DIA. The DIA was formed. Actually, no, I'm not 100% sure when the DIA was formed. Give me just a moment and we will find out. The Defense Intelligence Agency was established in 1961, specializing in military intelligence. it's important to do your research and cross-reference things. Regardless, Q is involved with all of that. And I think it's worth understanding that when we consider the word intelligence in operational context, we get a lot of different impressions and thoughts. We immediately think CIA because that's what all of our media and entertainment, that's where that word shows up the most. We see that a lot in our history books. CIA is stressed as very great guys in high school history books these days, which of course they're not. What we don't often consider is intelligence being kept on those who are collecting the intelligence. So no such agency, liaisons between the United States government and the Pentagon and areas of national security. That's why they are the National Security Administration. They also have deep connections with Cyber Command at the combatant command level. The DIA is essentially a dark agency. Not dark as in bad, dark as in good luck finding anything other than just public open source commentary and publicly available details that have been, strategically placed on websites and on ads and in phone books. The DIA keeps tabs on everybody in the world. Excuse me. The DIA is the brainwave collective for the digestion and dissemination of military intelligence. The DIA informs the armed forces of the United States directly about issues of national security. The DIA collects information on just about everybody from a national security standpoint, but in a time of war is empowered with the full authority of the United States military to conduct all reconnaissance operations necessary to defeat the enemy. The DIA is likely where you will find at least some people that are involved in the actual Q operational movement. So why all of this history about Q and military operations and intelligence and delineations? Well, we have this polarizing topic that happened in 2020 with the launch of the war on mankind's existence. It is a religious war motivated by those who are descended from the bloodlines of ancient Phoenicians and Canaanites. They worship the god Moloch, Baal. Those are two separate names given to the same entity, not the same name. Moloch is one name, Baal is another name. The god of child sacrifice and dismemberment. This war was seen coming for many years. Contingency measures and counter operations were executed along the way. Heroes such as Snowden and Assange, and others who are no longer with us, such as Seth Rich, Vincent Foster, and others, have helped propel the readiness and the preparations for this counter plan. When President Trump ascended to the presidency in 2016, President Trump won because Patriots in control of the NSA took steps necessary to unrig the election. An election that was already being rigged by Dominion voting systems and in democratic and communist localities all around our country. The NSA crippled their ability to cheat. They were able to cheat some, not nearly to the level that they planned. President Trump won, and that was end game. I know we've used that term a lot, But when you consider the longitudinal nature of this operation going back at least 60 to 80 years, anything in this era that we are currently living would be considered deep into the end game. With the power of the presidency at the hands of the United States military, the Q movement being very well connected to President Trump, President Trump was able to use the constitutional authority of his office to establish an infrastructure necessary to catch all of the criminals, to establish an operational readiness and set up for post the next election, to secure the elections legally and militarily, to reclaim assets from traitors and deep state, to militarily eradicate child trafficking. And at this point in the game where we're at currently, he authorized the United States military to take provisional control of the country of the United States of America, placed the military in control of the defense of the nation and the defense of the nation's 8 critical economic and infrastructural functions. This plan is epic. This plan is glorious. So fasting forward to 2020, we have these vaccines. The vaccine agenda has been going on for a long time, as we discussed earlier. The Q movement has known about the vaccine and depopulation agenda for a very long time. Every possible contingency and countermeasure has been accounted for. Every possible variation of every move has been planned out and thoroughly seen through. Every possible bit of military intelligence collected regarding the vaccination and campaign to depopulate the world through a religious war has been compartmentalized, disseminated, appropriately tagged. Evidence has been filed and collected. The unseal will blow your mind. Operation Warp Speed was a multi-fold operation, as is just about every operation concerning itself with the Q movement. Oftentimes, Q's timestamps correspond to multiple angles in different areas. The number 17 shows up in odd corresponding ways. Things like Julian Assange's 17 charges, a child trafficking, sex trafficking convict receiving 17 years. Codes mean things. In the context of this operation, codes mean many things. They have to. We can no longer assign, in an age of information warfare, a singular meaning to a singular code. Our linear setup and code structure can no longer be one-to-one. We have to use webs just like they do. This is game theory. We have to play their game better than they do. In 2020, Operation Warp Speed was launched by President Trump to speed up the lockdown process and save the entire world from crippling years of totalitarian lockdowns and forced mandates. It was to force the deep state to roll out the vaccination campaign faster. A great deal of truthers have an extremely difficult time with this topic. They simply cannot reconcile why President Trump would defend Operation Warp Speed, which accelerated the vaccine agenda onto the world. But Operation Warp Speed did many things. Operation Warp Speed involved seizure of as many deep state vaccination stores as possible until Trump's public operation until the public optics had to change. It was to bait the FDA out into the open and get them to pick a side. And of course, they chose the side of the big pharmaceuticals because they are controlled by the big pharmaceutical interests. But it polarized their treason. Prior to that, the FDA, while shitty, pardon my language there, was not guilty of something so massive as a crime against humanity or treason. Not provably in a singular event sort of way. Operation Warp Speed also directed military research and development to come up with a plan to countermand the effects of the vaccines in due time. And what does that mean? It means that the military was charged with coming up with an antidote to the current vaccines and the effects being caused by the current vaccines. But they also had to come up with a plan for what was going to happen with the nanotech and the hydrogels that were placed in people's bodies and bloodstreams through the ignorance of their choice. Extracting nanotechnology or hydrogel at the cellular level after it has had time to merge with the host is extremely dangerous. Yes, medbeds could do it, and I'm sure many medbeds will do it when we see the rollout of medical technology, which will replace what we currently understand as modern medicine. Still, we have a situation where we had to come up with something to do. We had to have a contingency. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I am here to tell you this evening, as I understand it from the source that I talked to, that a plan has been developed for those who took the poison kill shots unknowingly, without their informed consent that they were properly due. And there is a plan to right that wrong. And that plan perfectly encapsulates what Q is all about. If you write down notes on the top of a piece of paper, and then you decide that you didn't really like the way you took those notes and you want to take different notes, and you're going to rephrase things and just kind of make it all over more clear, you can line through the notes at the top of the paper and start over at the bottom. But that doesn't mean that the notes you took previously did not occur. They're still there. They are still a dedicated point in space and time that exists in our three-dimensional world. If you wanted to simply gloss over the errors or your dissatisfied point with those notes and move to the next focus, you would simply line out the top or scribble it out or whatever. But if you were out to reshape and redefine and reinvent and correct the notes from the top of the page and utterly change them forevermore, you would not line through the notes at the top of the page. You would gently tear the page off of your tablet. You would wad the notes up and set them on fire. And you would chemically convert them to nothingness. Just as with the Georgia Guidestones and the other monuments that you will see coming down or being reshaped and repurposed in the months and years to come, the Q operation is about reshaping and correcting our world. Correcting every sick, twisted, Kabbalist torture device and infrastructure placement out there. And the poetry involved with this justice, and the poetry that we see many times featuring itself in the Q drops, is we turn all of their things against them. We turned their vaccines against them with Operation Warp Speed. We turned the election steal against them with devolution. We turned the central bank against them through planning, backdoor dealing that was necessary to establish the freedom of mankind. We are turning their entire twisted apparatus against them, and we will use it to destroy them, and we will use it to accomplish good in the world. According to the source that I take my information from, those who have taken the poison shots and have managed to survive this long, the nanotechnology and hydrogel that is already in their body and being absorbed organically and reproduced genetically will enable them to receive Tesla healing frequencies directly to their cellular matrix from the same emitters that were going to formerly be used for their mass murder. Ladies and gentlemen, Donald Trump publicly supports the vaccine agenda. One, because it gets through to the normies and it bridges the gap and it keeps him in front of the greatest majority of American patriots possible. And it also keeps him on the radar of those who are uncertain about President Trump's reliability, but who understand that he seems to be the only one talking about good things for America. The other reason is because President Trump knows that Operation Warp Speed was about so much more than warp speeding the vaccines to market. They developed antidotes for the poison mRNA to try and minimize casualties as much as possible as we go through this transition phase. And they developed a plan using the same network that they were going to use to exterminate us, to accelerate our physical body healing, accelerate our physical body growth and renewal. These shots will be turned around for good. What is undeniable and unequivocally tragic is that at this stage in the game, the poison mRNA, because of how it interacts with the human body, is still doing the damage that it is doing. These shots in the present moment, at the present time, are kill shots. This program in no way advises you to get a kill shot. But those who have been duped and deceived by no fault of their own, completely and entirely against their free will, there is a plan for them. But that plan requires implementation across the entire world. That implementation is being coordinated and executed as fast as possible and has been for several years. We have to trench these scumbags out of their holes everywhere in the world before we can launch this next phase. We cannot move ahead as a civilization and a human race and a human species without ensuring our future. That is what this is about. Everything in good time. It is all coming together. Trust the plan, ladies and gentlemen. We win. The game has already been decided. The last moves of the first phase and the beginning moves of the next phase are within sight. The game is decided. Trust the plan. It's not on my time frame. It's not on your time frame. I know that it couldn't be fast enough for all of us. I've lost family to these shots. I completely understand. Excuse me, not family, friends. I apologize. I've lost friends to these shots. Close friends, friends that were so close they were like family. We are almost there. Hang on. These next few months will be wild. D-class will be enormous. You will soon be vindicated. And humanity will soon be united against an ancient and common threat. And our love and banding together with our brothers and sisters, our love for our children, our country, our guns, our source, our freedoms, our creator. It's going to wipe them out. Trust the plan. I hope to speak to all of you again soon. Have a wonderful evening.